Dr. Thomason, roll call.
President Reese, members of the board, please let the record show that we have 4 board members here tonight. Allie Ford is missing because she is on vacation in New York, so we hope she's having a good time and staying nice and cool.
Probably cooler than we are. All right. We're going to go ahead and have a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. We are going to go ahead and go on to 4.0. I move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
Any questions or comments about the agenda? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. 5.0 Superintendent's Report. Dr. Thomason?
Good evening, President Reese, members of the board. As you can see, summer vacation is in full swing, and we have a very sparse cabinet even here tonight, and so we're thankful for those that are here joining us tonight. So we do have some things coming up. 4th of July is coming up, and during the week of 4th of July, the Higley Unified School District will be hosting 2 sites to watch the Gilbert fireworks at Higley High School and at Centennial Elementary School. And so we will have festivals and activities at both those schools with some of our booster clubs participating to raise funds for some of their clubs and their sports events. So then when we come back, July 19th, we have the Welcome Back Rally. Hope to see everybody there in the Higley Center for Performing Arts with our governing board meeting that night at 5:30. And then the elementary schools have our Meet the Teacher night on July 20th, followed by the first day of school on July 24th. We're just a little over a month away from school starting, so it's been a quick summer.
Not ready.
Great, thank you. For board comments, I just want to make mention, just because it is summer and I do want to mention it again. We are pleased that we have a new contract with you and that you are going to continue in our district, and that was a couple weeks ago. We didn't have anyone when we came out of executive session, so at least now we get to say it more so. So we're really excited. We're excited about the strategic plan, and I know you guys have been working hard on that, so we have some implementation. So I appreciate, in a shorter summer, everyone's working to get a lot done. So,
President Reese, members of the board, we did have over 50 participants and taking a look at the 4 strategic goal areas for the new strategic plan, and started developing some goals and objectives for each of those areas that included teachers, administrators, classified and certified staff throughout the district that help participate in those goals and objectives for us to carry forward for the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you, and we appreciate everyone giving their time over summer to help us make that a successful implementation. Any other board comments? All right. We would go on to 6.0, request to speak to the governing board. No requests. So we will go on to 7.0, our consent agenda. I move that we approve consent agenda items 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, 7.4, 7.5, 7.6, 7.7, and 7.8.
Second.
Any comments or questions about the consent agenda?
Yes, I have a couple questions. On the top of it says submitted by the former HR person on our documents.
I did notice that.
So
President Reese, members of the board, before Sheila Swanson left, she did put this together. At the next board meeting, you would see that it would be submitted by somebody else, but she was able to put this together shortly before her last days last week, before the board meeting this week.
Okay. So as we go through this list of new hires, since she has left, I guess my question to you, or Attorney Good, is somebody's reviewing the policy and procedures to make sure background checks are done, phone calls are made, and somebody is signing off on this in our school district in lieu of our new HR person?
Yes, Vice President Mr. Witovich, yes, I am picking up some of those duties along with our school attorney, Ms. Linda Good, and she's picking up some of those too, along with the HR staff, Tammy Navarro and Leah, and the rest of the HR staff is helping to take care of those. Also, Dr. Schlingberg has stepped in and is taking care of some of the certified hires that are taking there. So we've kind of divvied up the work for a little bit till we get the new HR director in place.
Okay. So all of our positions that we're approving tonight, we have job descriptions in place for those individuals that are listed as new hires in our school district?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Madam President,
Mr. Glover?
just one 7.7. I just they're not here, but it's nice to see that Mr. Griggs and Ms. Wang are representing Higley at a national conference, which is item 7.7. So they are presenting there, and I think that's great for Higley.
Anything else? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries 4-0.
President Reese, members of the board, with your ratification of our consent agenda, I would like to introduce two of the newest members of the Higley Unified School District administrative team. First, going on as assistant principal at Cooley Middle School, Mr. Greg Keith. Mr. Keith, would you please introduce your family?
President Reese, Dr. Thomason, members of the board, thank you for giving me this opportunity to come back again to Higley. We live in the neighborhood. I thought Emily, my wife Emily, is a school psychologist also and staying in Queen Creek. My daughter Emma is going into 5th grade at Santan Elementary. She thinks all this is because she's returned to Santan. And so we're really excited to be back in Higley and grateful for the opportunity and the trust that the governing board and the administration has shown us. I'm very excited about the opportunity to be assistant principal at Cooley Middle School. Thank you.
Welcome back.
Welcome home, Mr. Keith. Also, as the new assistant principal at the Bridges Elementary School, we have Mr. Todd Berg. Mr. Berg.
I'd just like to thank everybody for this opportunity. I'm very excited. I was in the Chandler School District as the Dean of Students at an elementary school for the past 3 years. Really excited. I know Jeff and I have a lot of the same philosophies, so I know we're going to make a great team, and looking forward to continue building that culture and traditions at Bridges School. This is my wife, Patty. She is also an educator. She's a math teacher. And this is my daughter, Hallie. She will be a sophomore this year. So.
All right. Well, welcome to Higley.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to go on. Mrs. Kaler, are you sure? Okay. We're going to go on to our action and information items. We have 9.1, the information item of our monthly governing board finance report for May of 2017. Did anyone have any questions? No questions? Okay. Thank you for the time that you put together, Mr. Holland. All right, 9.2. Sorry. I'm going to move that we approve the first read of the amendment of policy KH, public sales on school property concerning sales by employees.
I'll second.
So right now it's a first read. There's been clearly some changes to our policy. Does anyone have any questions? It's good. Can you kind of explain the change here, please?
There's really not much of a change to this policy. In fact, the language that newly appears in this policy already appears in another. We've kind of got a group of policies that all go together here. And the idea was that we'd have KH relate more to employee activity, and then KHA, I believe it is, that would go to members of the public. I know that's a little bit of a stretch with the title of KH being public sales. However, ASBA is very, they don't take well to changing the titles of their policies. I tried that once. I didn't succeed. And so we just leave the title, but this is where really the shift that we're making in those.
Okay.
And the whole series of policies that you have are all geared to it's really protecting our schools from being captive audiences, places where people can come and sell things to the staff or the students. Perhaps surprisingly, we get a lot of that. And so that's the impetus for coming up with these policy changes.
Okay.
President Reese,
Mrs. Kaler?
I just want to reiterate, too, that I think it's just good to bring out again to the public. I think there's a lot of inner sales going on in our with a lot of our staff and bringing products to school and whatnot. So, and there's lots of competition, so I think it needs to be even all the way around. So I appreciate this coming before us and just bringing it to my attention.
All right, then I will go ahead and amend my motion to waive the first read, to waive the second read and approve the amendment to policy KH.
I second.
So at this point, we would waive our second read and just implement or approve this policy. Does anyone have any questions on that change? Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Motion carries 4-0. As Ms. Good said, we have several of these policies, so I'm going to make the motion that we waive our second read on amendment policy KHA, public solicitations in schools, to limit solicitation to school-related groups, and approve the amendment.
Second.
Any questions on the second policy? Comments? No? All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
Madam President,
Mr. Glover?
I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but I know these guys are probably all waiting for the right time to leave. Do we want to break for maybe 1 minute? It'll allow them to exit gracefully, or unless you guys want to be stuck here for a while.
We really just have policies that
I know you're being polite.
we're making
so I'm giving you a
amendments
chance.
to. So
We're used to
really
we're
don't
very
have to
used to
sit.
mass exodus. Okay. Be safe.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam President.
Our faithful Jill.
Hi, Jill.
Faithful Jill.
All right, so 9.4, I move that we waive our second read on and approve the amendment of policy KHB, advertising in schools, to standardize the sale of advertising space at school sites.
I second.
Now this one has a little bit different. I'm still comfortable with it, but
Yes.
to explain it, because I know this one's going to cause some confusion, I believe. I've read through it, I understand it, but if you can give an explanation on this one.
Absolutely. President Reese, members of the board, throughout the school district, we had advertising banners and sign advertising throughout the district that costs were determined by site administration or booster clubs or football boosters or different associations that were associated with the signage that was put up in our cafeterias, our gymnasiums, or on our sports field and fences. And so to be more consistent across the district so that one association would be consistent with another association, we did move that in-house. The funds would still go to the exact same booster club or whoever that was supporting it in the past. It's just that we have now a consistent costs for advertising throughout the district, whether it be for our gymnasiums, for our football fields and those aspects. So one association couldn't complain that someone else was getting preferential treatments or they weren't being treated the same as another club or another association.
Okay, so my question on this is, one, all the banners that are currently in our schools, on our fences, are all those coming down?
President Reese, members of the board, no, those are not coming down at this time. We will respect and understandably keep those up for the remainder of the year, but the following year we will start and make sure that everything is in place and consistent throughout the district. So they would have 1 year to follow the procedures. If someone has paid for a sign for the support of the football boosters or for the baseball boosters, then we would recognize that for the year that they have had that put up at their school.
Okay, and how is this policy going to be rolled out to the sites for the PTOs, PTAs,
We are working with all the
boosters?
PTOs, with the PTAs, the booster clubs. That will be a training that's put on through Dr. Fowler's area that will be training for our coaches and our booster clubs with our principals and assistant principals to make sure that we're consistent across the district.
Okay, so upon this getting approved tonight, is communication going out immediately? Because now is when football, band, PTO, they're doing fundraising and they're looking for sponsors right now. So how are we handling that piece?
President Reese, we are working with the administrative team to have this administrative training take place the first week of June. July, I'm sorry.
Okay.
For our administrative training retreat. At this point in time, we have numerous administrators that are out, but they'll all be back for the first week of July.
Okay. Can we have some type of communication go out and say, hold on, there's a new policy coming?
Absolutely. We will get that sent out tomorrow.
Okay. So, it's not a new policy, it's a change in policy. That way we can try and get ahead of it before these agreements are made.
Absolutely. I'll send something out tomorrow to all of our administrators.
That if they can just email or contact their
Community
booster
education.
presidents and clubs and PTOs, PTAs, all that. So that way it's not a matter of the
No
lack
surprises.
of. Correct.
President Reese,
Mr. Glover?
I'm sorry, you did not make a motion, though, to waive the second read of this one, did you?
I did.
You did. Okay. And that, Dr. Thomason, that would be your recommendation as well?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because I would think that we would want opportunity for feedback on this one, but we're not going to really have it if we don't have a second read. So, but if you're comfortable and you have a plan.
And President Reese, members of the board, we would honor any agreements that we have already made.
No, and I hear what you're saying, Mr. Glover. I think also I think that the feedback would be minimal, given that, unfortunately, the time of year. So, and I see the need for the change in this policy. So, any other comments, questions? No. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. All right. I move that, on 9.5, I move that we approve the 2017-18 master terms and agreement between the Higley Unified School District and Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions, comments on this particular one? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. We will go on to 9.6. I move that we waive our second read on the amendment of policy JFABC, the admission of transfer students concerning transfer credit from a joint technical education district.
Need a second? Second.
All right. Any questions on this one?
Yes, Madam President.
Mr. Glover.
It's more of just a comment, but I'm hoping that Dr. Thomason can speak to this. We spoke about it, but I just want the board to also understand, and maybe you had those conversations with him. I don't, with open meeting laws, we don't know. So, but the deal is that some of the JTEDs have figured out ways to offer chemistry, biology, etc. credit for classes that really aren't that, and they sometimes take a standard or two from a particular class, and then they'll say this meets the standard. So this policy, as you know, is just saying that they have to pass our final exam. So my question to Dr. Thomason was, how does one, I know the answer, but you can tell the crowd or anybody that dares watch this, but how and when would one take a final exam if they needed to? So please.
President Reese, members of the board, what this policy does, it takes a look at the fidelity and validity of the classes we have within the Higley Unified School District. A student that is taking a class through a joint technical education program would still have the opportunity to take the test at the end, and if they would pass the test, then we would give them credit for the core class. It would be no different than a student coming from another area that did not have that class on their transcripts. They would be offered the opportunity to test out of the course. If they had the significant knowledge to pass the final for the chemistry class, for the biology class, for the upper level math class, then we would go ahead and issue that credit. The concern comes in is the JTEDs offering core credits that are not aligned to the district practices and standards that we hold high within our district. And so we would not want to offer a biology credit that did not meet the criteria that the Higley Unified School District Governing Board set for biology. But if the student was able to pass the JTED class, come in and take that test, the test out of our biology class, we would still offer them the credit as if they had taken the class. It would be a test out situation.
So, Dr. Thomason, just to anybody who's one, so they would contact their home school at any time, right?
Anytime. This is without even having to have taken a JTED class. This is a student that may be very gifted in an area that has significant knowledge above what's required for the course. a great example with that would be a foreign exchange student that would like to take a higher level Spanish class, and they've already have had Spanish as their home language. They could test out of Spanish 1 and Spanish 2.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. I'm going to move that we approve the amendment for policy EFDA, the collection of money and food tickets.
Second.
Now, I do have some questions on this one. So if I'm reading it correctly, it is that we are no longer going to offer a substitute, that they will be offered the regular meal, and their account will go into the negative.
President Reese, members of the board, yes, we worked all year this past year to try to implement the alternative lunch aspect, so the cheese sandwich. However, with not being able to pull a tray from a child and the setup that we had at each of our school sites, because we tried to look at reorganizing or restructuring, it just every avenue we went down seemed to be a stumbling block. And the current policy that the board had was that would allow the child to go in the rears 3 meals, right? But then after that, so what was happening this year is they would go in the rears 3 meals, and then everything after that was continuing to be charged as an alternate lunch. That's how we wound up with $147,000 in the negative. So the plan for next year is that it'll no longer be 3 meals and then an alternate lunch sort of aspect. We'll be tracking every single meal. The cheese sandwich will not be an aspect. They'll still be eligible for they'll still receive the same hot lunch as all of the other students. We currently have ongoing efforts, telling the student, sending letters home, sending emails, telephone calling, and we have multiple people all doing that now. So the plan is to continue to do that for next year. However, in an effort to try to minimize this huge continuing deficit, we would track every single meal. If after we get to a certain period of time where all of our efforts at the district have failed, then we would turn that over to a collection agency to try to collect on that past debt. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I know that I think nationwide, an alternative meal thing that has become kind of a big issue on, my child didn't have lunch money, my fault, I forgot to send it. They were pointed out with an alternate, they were given a cheese sandwich or something. That's become a big thing nationwide. So I do appreciate just kind of the unintended that does help with those students in that aspect. However, I do have to say, $147,000 is a lot.
Yes, it is.
And if that is what we're negative, and we continue to serve full meals, and we weren't able to collect this, I guess I'm concerned going even further into a non-collection situation.
President Reese, we currently, for every meal we serve that student, we pay for it regardless of whether we receive any type of reimbursement or not.
Right.
Even the cheese sandwich, there's going to be a charge for that as well. And so working with SFE, we found that probably the best approach would just be to continue to serve the hot meal and track every single meal as opposed to stop tracking after 3 meals.
Right.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but we're trying.
Yeah, I'm just saying
I'm
the
at
cost
a
of
dead end
that.
at the moment, and so I'm trying a different approach.
Yeah, the cost of that hot meal is going to be a little more than the cost of
It's the same,
as the alternate meal.
because that's what SFE is going to charge us. It's not
Right,
that it
I'm
costs
saying-
more to them, but the charge
Currently.
to us will be the same,
Gotcha. Okay.
Right, so Madam
whether you
President,
give a
this
hot meal or you
preserves
give a
the
cheese
dignity-
sandwich.
Yeah, this preserves the dignity of a child. and
Absolutely.
it doesn't cost us any more than what we're already paying.
We're already
so,
paying
yeah,
it.
Gotcha.
I think it's a good change.
Right.
I'm going to ask you an awkward question.
Okay.
Is it the same persons that continually with the subsidized lunch program, they get the free lunch, okay? So do we have individuals that continually forget their lunch and expect us to pay for this, and it continues on throughout the school year, or is it sporadic?
No, sir. It's a continuous same student. The cafeteria managers know exactly who those students are, and it's a continuous process. So we had that going on at all of our schools this year. However, we were able to.
So the student doesn't get subsidized lunch program, so the parents figure they'll just have their student not bring the lunch, and so they really are getting a subsidized lunch program at our expense. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes.
So that could happen across the district more and more if we don't take some steps here, I guess, is where I'm like, I mean, that could be the norm, is we could have a lot of people figure, well, the school district is just going to continue to give these lunches to these parents that just, so how are we addressing if it continues to be the same individuals that are doing this? I can understand once in a while a student forgets, that's life, but it's every day, and it's costing our district $100-some thousand, you said, Mrs. Reese?
Yeah,
Mr.
it's
Witovich.
$140,000. Why aren't we having some conversations here?
The way the policy was written in the past, they could only go 3 lunches in arrears, and then we stopped tracking for it. And at this point, now we can track for as many lunches they go in arrears, and then we can turn over to the collection agencies and get the true cost of those unfunded meals back from parents and families. Because only after 3 before, there was not a policy in place to keep track of how many meals they really did have. This will allow us to track exactly how many lunches students have had in the arrears. And so that will help with that aspect also. There are also some things in place for students as they move on from school to school to help collect those funds. Now, there is one thing that I'm a true believer in, is that we do not want to punish kids for adult problems.
It's not that, but it's not the children, it's the parents
Absolutely.
that are taking advantage of the system, and for $100-some thousand, we can put that to better use in our school district for all the children in our school district.
Absolutely,
So,
but now
so
we
it's not
have
the
a
parent,
actual
it's not the
problem.
children, it's the parents here that are
Absolutely.
taking advantage of us.
Mr. Witovich, I think that to having this policy in place that says we'll send you to collections, when one parent gets sent to collections for lunch, it will send a message from our district, I believe. So I'm thankful that we aren't going to be giving out a cheese sandwich. It has happened to my child, and I heard about it, so I pay back, I promise. But so I appreciate the policy and read through it and thought it was very well done. So thank you.
I agree.
This is an attempt to, it was kind of the next step. How else were we going to try to bring these parents to comply, for lack of a better word, right? To send the money to pay for the students' lunch. Just to kind of give you a heads up. So we were able to implement the cheese sandwich process at our high schools, okay? And so what we found immediately, within the same day, and with the next couple of days it resolved itself, was the student actually had the money in their pocket to pay for the lunch, but since they've been getting it free all year, then why do they have to pay? Well, today you have to pay, and no more free lunch. So you can either have a cheese sandwich, or you can have no lunch, you choose. And all of a sudden students started pulling money out of their pocket, and then some said, I don't want anything, they would just leave. But that kind of self-corrected itself, like even that week. And so, so that is, I guess I'm just trying to explain that we were able to do that. That was very successful. But when you get down to the elementary students, that's a completely different ballgame.
No, and I agree. And I think that with Mr. Glover, it certainly does protect the dignity of the child, and it's certainly not their fault, nor do we want anyone to go hungry. But we do need to hold parents accountable, whether that be that they haven't filled out the free and reduced lunch application, that here, you know, this is a good program for you then, you know, because I don't want, like I said, I don't want a child to go hungry at all. And if their parents can't afford it, and that's okay. That's why we have these applications. That's why they can get free and reduced lunches. So, but when they're not filling out the application, it's like kind of like, let me help you help your child, you know. So I guess as long as we have some multiple layers of communication, and that we also put kind of a flag when they're getting to, you know, if we're 10 meals in and we've not been able to get a hold of the parent, you know, then that kind of needs to escalate so that we are getting, you know, whether that's come in and meet with our principal or assistant principal, let's sit down and talk, come meet with our cafeteria manager, let's sit down and talk and see what we can do to help resolve the situation. Because, I mean, I agree with Mr. Vitovich, I have no problem feeding kids. We have $147,000 in lost monies that could go in other ways also to help more children. So I just want to be sure that we're kind of putting some stop gaps in there. Clearly not stop serving the children, but where we're kind of escalating it a little bit more.
Please know that we do have a huge ongoing push to get the applications sent home. We email them, we mail them home, we send them home in the child's backpack. And we have them available at all of our school sites and here at the district. And we do have staff that call these parents, email these parents. We mail the stuff home. So we do have a huge effort to try to get those applications filled out. And we also do have the ability to make an administrative decision and sign up that child and put them on that list, whether the parent completes the application or not. That's a case-by-case basis.
Perfect.
And
You know, I would just like to see both of you go above and beyond, and I think if there are some people taking advantage of our system, I hope you pursue it, you know, and hold these people accountable, because as I said, they're taking opportunities, money from all the district here, so please hold these people accountable that are taking advantage of the district in this. So
Track of those frequent offenders. Because with the past policy, we only tracked up to 3 lost lunches, and we really didn't know who was in the rears, 50, 60, 70 lunches. This will end up calculating all of those students that take advantage of it on a regular basis.
right, so that's what I wanted to say as well. So those cheese sandwiches were invisible. We were paying for all of them, right?
Yes.
So in this case, you know, if it looks like you owe $6, but you've had 50 cheese sandwiches, we've paid for all of them, and you could have had a hot meal for the same price, right? So I think when you're as a parent and you see, oh, I'm $50 behind, I probably better get on that, as opposed to, you know, three meals anyway.
Also, please know that there are multiple factors that come into play here. So say, for example, if a parent has, say, 6 children, right, and they link all of their accounts together, well, at the high school level, the lunches cost more, right? And so then if some students eat more of the lunches, then the other children don't have enough money. So it becomes kind of a vicious cycle. Parents will put in, you know, like $10, well, then that gets eaten up in 2 days, sort of thing. And so it's just a continuous cycle, right? So that's why, because of the dollar amount, Vice President Wotovich, that's why we went to now moving it to more teeth and moving it to a collection agencies. Is if all of our efforts are falling on deaf ears, okay, so now someone else is going to be involved, and there's a totally different aspect to that.
To recover some.
Try to.
Right. No, I appreciate it, and I appreciate that we're trying to minimize that deficit.
And please know we've been working on this all year.
Yeah, and I know you guys do. We do a whole lot better on the free and reduced applications. I know, especially at the beginning of the year, I see it all over the place. I see it in my emails, on the website, coming home with my kids, and everything. So I know that there's a huge push, and we try and get people, whether you think you qualify or not, please fill it out, send it back. So and I know sometimes that's a hard thing for. That's a sense of pride, and so sometimes that's a hard thing to do. But if it can really help their student, then I know we encourage that. So
And we do try to convey that message. Even if the parents don't want to do it, and they say they're struggling or living paycheck to paycheck, they could potentially qualify for that. And so that's another reason why we try to push, because then that really could be a benefit to them that they don't even realize.
Well, and it's also something for those watching. School year is a long time. Things, life happens in those times. So they may not have filled it out, or they may fill it out and didn't qualify at the beginning of the year. They had something change in their life, loss of a job, loss of a parent, who knows, and they would then qualify, but they may not know that they can reapply. And so when we start seeing that, having that conversation with dignity with the parents, if something's changed, fill it out again. Your circumstances have changed. So it's just something to be aware of and to have the conversation.
And please note that I have received those telephone calls this year where a parent was making a very good salary and then lost their job. And so then she did not have the funding. So she did reach out to me, and we were able to help her and fix that process. And that she's not the only one. I got a couple of those calls this year. So
yeah, we understand that happens, and being able to work with them, and sometimes it's hard for them to come to us. So in this instance, it does become a little bit of a little red flag to have that conversation. So
And
I would also like to say too that Gary and his team have worked very hard on this. This is something.
there you go.
This is something that's not new for the district, but something that we've got a very good handle on the accounting portion now. And when you see the numbers, they are quite staggering. But to be in full transparency, we want to put those out there, take a look at those, see where we're at, know what we need to do to make those corrections, and move forward.
Perfect. Thank you.
And just, Madam President, just Dr. Thomason, make sure, I know you will, but make sure that the principals are aware as soon as possible of this new policy, because again, I think it does help preserve some of the dignity of a child. So we just get that message out there. Okay, good. Good. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you. That was great conversation and information. If we don't have anything else on this one, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. At the moment here, I'm going to move for the first read of the amendment to policy IJNDB, the use of technology resources in instruction.
Oh, second.
Is there questions and comments on this one? I was looking through this, and I had something on this one, and my note's not here. Ms. Good, can you talk about the change in the language here on the training piece?
It really doesn't change things much at all. The way that it was worded before was, it seemed a little harsh that employees will be held to strict compliance regardless of whether training has been given. It just didn't seem appropriate. So this is really just a case of trying to soften the wording to show that employees are expected to do these things. There will be training. It's really just massaging some words, and I have to say it really doesn't mean a whole lot. Probably the more something that is, this is just a minimal thing. These are just playing with a policy. I'm suggesting that we remove on the first page the kinds of sources of information. For example, I don't know how many people have floppy disks anymore. I hear the Washington D.C. offices do, but so it was just better with technology going the way it is. Since it's just computer accessible, we'll just leave it that way. I have to say that paragraph toward the end, it really isn't much of a change. We were in the process, Mrs. Corey had discovered that there were about 3 different kinds of forms that were being used for computer usage. And as she and I were working on just kind of combining them so that we hit all the points to come up with a version, we saw these places in this policy that seemed they could also be revised.
So how does this policy play into our bring your own device?
Actually, it doesn't go into it a lot because this really has to do with this particular policy has to do with the use of district resources. Now, bring your own device, you are still using district resources because you're using the network. But it doesn't, this predates the bring your own device.
Right.
And actually, some of the content of this is really dictated by the E-rate regulations that in order to be eligible for E-rate, you must have the Children's Internet Protection Act must be complied with. And in fact, this policy was, with a slight revision, wasn't very long ago. It was less than a year ago that there was not so much the policy, but the regulation that followed it was brought forward because the regulation had never been adopted, and it was necessary to have it so that we qualified for on our E-rate application. So it's simply a means of, it's part of the process. I'm not being very articulate. My tongue seems to be tired. It's part of the supervision of the use of whether it's the devices or the network itself. And there is, of course, an acceptable use agreement that goes, which is really what Mrs. Corey and I were working on, that caused us to stumble across these pieces of the policy that we thought could be changed. It's just the backdrop of being able to monitor students' use and to try to step in and control use when it becomes inappropriate.
I mean, conversation. Are you guys good? Because we can amend the emotion.
President Reese, members of the board, I think one of the concerns is that when students are on our internet system or they're on our system, it still does go through all of our filters. Anytime they log on, it'll go through our filters with the same blocks and the same filter devices that they would use if they were on one of our network machines. And that happens with anybody that logs on to our internet system.
Well, then, looks like everyone seems to be comfortable, so I will amend my motion. And the amendment is to approve or waive the second read and approve the amendment of policy IJNDB, the use of technology resources in instruction.
Second.
Any other questions or discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion carries 4-0. I move that we approve the award of a contract to Henfield, Meach and Company in response to RFP number 17-07-22 for audit services for the 2017-18 fiscal year.
President Reese, members of the board, we do have an update on this.
Do you want me to get a second first?
Yes, I would like Gary Holland to give us the update on this. It's just a small update that we do have the to be determined by information completed at this time. Mr. Holland.
President Reese, members of the board, this RFP just closed, and so we had a very short time frame to turn this around. So your cover sheet that you're looking at was actually a placeholder, and so I do apologize that the updated cover sheet did not make it to your packet. The updated cover sheet does reflect that we would like to award the contract to Heinfeld and Meach at a cost of $219,600. Now that is for the entire term. So how does that break down? It breaks down to about $43,920 for the 17-18 school year, which is consistent with what we paid in 16 and what we will be paying for our audit for 17.
All right, do I have a second on my motion?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Mr. Holland, have we used them before?
They are our current auditors, yes, ma'am.
Madam President.
Mr. Glover?
Mr. Holland, I know you said it last time when it was put out to RFP, just for the record, maybe put it in your own words, this is required by the state, and it's something that is independent of what we do, and
yes.
it's all, I'm supportive, and I know what it is, but anybody, again, in the public that was wondering why this is, if you could speak to that, please.
We are required by the state to go out for a new RFP every 5 years. So it's a 5-year term. And so our previous contract that we had with them ended this school year. So we had to go through the RFP process for new audit services for next year, and it is eligible for renewal each year after that for a 5-year period of time. We did receive quotes from 3 different audit firms, which we did evaluate. Those firms were Heinfeld and Meach, Clifton Larson Allen, and a company out of New Mexico, RPC Consultants. So those were the 3 responses. And we did evaluate using the criteria that is set by the Auditor General's office. You have to submit everything to them, and then they will approve it. If they approve it, then you continue on with the process. Does that make sense?
So in the past, they've shown up when we've just renewed ongoing contracts.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. because I was like, that name didn't sound familiar. That's why I was wondering if they had done work for us, but that's because they would be lumped in with all of our
Well,
renewals.
It's a renewal, correct.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 4-0. 9.10. So I move that we accept the proposed fiscal year 2018 annual expenditure budget and approve uploading both the notice of public hearing and the budget summary hearing notice as required by statute.
Second.
So this is allowing us to get our notice out and for a public hearing. Mr. Holland's favorite. It's your favorite.
So President Reese, members of the board, tonight I would like to bring to you a presentation for our 17-18 school year budget. This is a proposal. So yes, what you just discussed a moment ago, the public hearing is a requirement that will come into place when you, if you accept this budget, then you will adopt it. We'll have a public hearing first, and then you would adopt the budget. Okay. Every time. Sorry, technical difficulty. This seems to happen to me every single time I get up here.
That's why I said your presentation's your favorite.
Okay, just wanted to know which one because I was doing down. Okay. There we go. Okay. So when you're putting your budget together each year, there are many factors that go into play. One of them, a big factor, of course, is our tax rates. Everybody wants to know what is going to happen to our tax rate. Are our taxes going to go up? So when we start looking at our budget, the first thing we look at is our tax rate. So looking at our tax rate, what it was for FY17. So our primary tax rate this current fiscal year was 4.8445%. We also have a secondary tax rate, which is 3.09%, which is made up of our M&O override. This year being the first year, so the rate was 1.625. Plus, we had our bonds of 1.47, which is our debt service repayment schedule. So a total tax rate of 7.9398%. In 2016, the Arizona legislature passed a bill that would go into effect in July of 2017 that now changes the formula of how schools calculate their tax rates. So previously, we were able to factor in cash, encumbrances, and our budget balance carry forward into the formula, which kind of helped offset the tax rate. However, starting July 1st of this year, you can no longer factor any of those into the equation. So when we're looking at how do we arrive at that rate, so I'm looking at a qualifying tax rate. So I thought I would give you a little bit of definition of what exactly is a qualifying tax rate. So the tax rate is set by the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, or the JLBC, to determine the local tax levy required by the district is so that they're eligible to receive equalization assistance. So it's the funding from the state. The qualifying tax rate is adjusted annually based on an inverse relationship to the assessed evaluation for the entire state. So for example, if the statewide appraised value goes down, the qualifying tax rate will go up. Does that make sense? So what has happened this year, our qualifying tax rate has gone down because the statewide assessed value went up and there were more properties in the state to spread the expense across. So the qualifying tax rate went from 4.1586 down to 4.0468. The assessed value went up from 554 billion to 556 billion. Again, so there was more properties to spread the expense across, lowering the tax rate. So for our 18, this is an estimated tax rate because those rates are not available, finalized until around August, that come out from the county. So our estimated primary rate for this coming year will be 4.0641, and our secondary tax rate will be 3.16, which is made up, again, of our M&O override. Now this will be our second year, so the rate will go down a little bit. So it's 1.5479, and then our bonds is at 1.621. Again, that's our debt service repayment schedule, for a total of 7.2241. So exactly what is the end result? You'll notice that our tax rate decreased by 0.7157%. And of course, that is attributed to the new tax formula, the qualifying tax rate decreasing and the assessed value increasing. So what makes up our M&O budget and how is it calculated? So we start with our revenue control limit. So this year our revenue control limit calculated out to be $58,295,717. We have our M&O override of 15%, which is little over 9.4 million. Now please keep in mind, I say 15%, but it's based off of 1700 day ADM. So you can't take 58 million times 15% and get that number because it's based off of prior year ADM. We have our budget balance carry forward that we're currently estimating it to be around $2.5 million. Plus we have our portion of the state land trust sale of the $50 million, which our portion will be $514,550. So our 18 budget will be $70,742,400. Sorry, let me try that again. $70,742,424, whereas our revised FY17 budget is a little over 68.2. Now, how will those funds be spent? So the board has already approved a 2% salary increase for all staff. Plus, we have additional positions that we are funding this coming year. Next, let's talk about the 1.06% teacher increase. This will be fun. So who are eligible for this? So only certified teachers who taught in an Arizona public school during FY17 or 16-17 school year, and they continue to teach in the 17-18 school year would be eligible. That rate is based off of total compensation earned for that individual coming from the function 1000, which is instruction. So you would take their total compensation times the 1.06%, but that is based on their 17 compensation. The district, so you have new staff that come from another district to, say they come to Higley. The district is responsible to contact or reach out and contact those districts to collect the salary information for that individual for the 16-17 school year. We will then take and multiply that by the 1.06%. Of course, it is going to be a little bit of a challenge to try to collect all of that information. So currently what the districts are doing, working through ASBO, is they're in the process of developing a standardized form so that the schools can send that out to each of the school districts or the schools to collect this information. And the hope is by having a standardized form that it would kind of ease the process because everybody would be seeing the same form and the process would be the same. So currently what we have budgeted in our budget, we budgeted $366,553. However, of course, since we do not know exactly what that number is going to be, we are required by the state to do a budget revision, which would be done in October to be uploaded to the Department of Education by November. The intent of that, of course, is we start the new school year, we have our new staff, we collect the information, we find out exactly how much is it going to cost. We revise our budget to increase it from the 366. We upload it to the Department of Education by November the 1st. The state will then take all that information, calculate it all together to determine exactly what the allocation is, and then they will be sending that payment out to all of the schools in early December. Now it's the district's plan to then take those funds and do them as a one-time stipend payment so that we can track those dollars very cleanly, very specifically, so it has a good audit trail, and we'd pay that out before winter break.
I have a question then. So our teachers will not see this raise on their paycheck starting when they come back to
The
school?
1.06%.
Correct. That's just going to be
No, it'll be a
December.
one-time. It'll be a one-time payment
Okay.
that we'll do as a stipend.
And we're telling our staff that they all know this information. Nobody's expecting their $1.42.
Well, we have to pass it.
We won't know that information.
Gotcha.
That's why we need the time frame to collect all that information. So I'll have no idea what that number is going to be. So next, let's look at our unrestricted capital budget. So in FY17, our capital budget was a little over $14.1 million. So to date, we have spent a little over $6.4 million, leaving us a carry forward balance of 7.6. However, please keep in mind, this money, it's not truly a carry forward number, it's just that it's already been allocated out. So what makes up this 7.6 is our lease payment of the $3.25 million, plus our adjacent waves potential payback of the $3.4 million, plus our new curriculum adoption of a 1.2. What we are taking out of our M&O budget to move over to meet all of our other capital needs, because the district has a huge capital need, but we don't have enough funding to cover all of those. So we're able to allocate this year $6 million. We have our district additional assistance of $822,952. But one thing I'd like to point out specifically about the DAA is our number actually really calculates out to a little over $5.6 million. However, the legislature has implemented a statewide reduction because they need to come up with $352 million. They take 85% of our $5.6 million, so they take 4.8, and we get what's left, which is the $822,000. Now, if you'll notice, we're moving $6 million over out of our operating budget to meet our capital need, but if the state didn't take our funding and we had 100%, we would have $5.6 million already right there. So we wouldn't have to move as much out of our budget.
Now, Mr. Holland,
Yes, ma'am.
regarding the district additional assistance, do they still report it that they're, like, that we get $5 million, even though they're taking it back?
No, it's reflected that you get the 822,
Okay.
but just so that everybody has an understanding, there is a lawsuit currently going on to try to recoup those funds. However, that's probably going to be a long term.
When they first started pulling it back, they were like, but you got this amount. Well, yeah, but you took this amount, you took 85% of it back.
Right.
So,
And they're always going to say, hey, you had 5.6 million, right?
right?
But you kept 85%
But you
of it.
kept 85% of it.
Correct. And so the reason why I want to point that out is because that's, when you see legislators or other individuals that you interact with, please try to help stress the importance of getting that capital funding back. We can't do a whole lot with $822,000.
Yeah, we would only have to move 1 million, not 6 million.
Correct. So next year, we're anticipating we'll have a budget of a little over 14.4 million to meet our capital needs. But again, please note that we still have more capital, more of a capital need, because we also have our IT refresh. That's about $3.5 million every year that we're having to take out of our bond. Plus, we have our capital repairs going on, new construction going on, roof repairs. That all is coming out of bond as well. And some of the funding that we get from SFB when it comes back finally, but we're fronting it, of course, with using our bond dollars. And then, of course, all of our schools and district needs as well. So we have an extensive need for capital items. We just need funding to be able to meet those demands. Next, I'd like to talk to you about special education. So previously, the special education categories used to be broken down very extensive by each and every disability categorization. However, they now have all been collapsed, which was done as of last year. But I'd just like to bring that up as a reminder. So all the disability classifications are now rolled together. So in FY17, our SPED budget, we had a little over 8.2 million. This year, because our SPED demand is very high, we're at about $8.9 million. So next year we've allocated 9.2 to hopefully meet that demand. Also, you'll notice gifted. So the state does not give any funding for a gifted program. That money comes out of our M&O budget as well. So we've allocated $376,000 for that. We have our ELL cost of $189,000 and then $37,000, as well as, of course, our JTED funding, which is changing. That's why you see it in two different lines, and how we tracked it in 17 versus how we're tracking it in 18 is completely different. So we've allocated a 304 for JTED. So our total 17 expenditures is a little over 8.8 million, and we're anticipating our 18 expenditures to be a little over 10.1 million. So next, let's talk about our classroom site fund, or our Prop 301 dollars. So in FY17, we had our budget minus our actual expenditures, of course, equaling our unexpended balance. So we have a total unexpended balance of a little over 2.7. We have our additional allocation of 5.5. We have a little over $8,000 in interest, so our 18 budget for classroom site would be a little over $8.3 million. I've heard that there's some questions about such a large balance in this fund, and I just wanted to kind of stress to everybody and know that the district is being in an effort to be very fiscally responsible and conservative. We try to make sure that we have a little bit of a carryover each year, because these funds then are used for those additional teachers, additional expenditures that come up, because we can only allocate so many or fund so many positions out of M&O that we then have to come up with a different source. And so we're able to utilize these funds to help meet that need. And I can tell you, especially in 16-17, we had quite a few new teachers that we had to fund. And so this was a source that we were able to go to meet that demand. Also, one thing else to keep in mind is, the classroom site fund money comes in 3 different buckets, one of them being for performance. And that performance pay is not paid out until July, August timeframe. So that money would still be set in there as a carry forward amount to be paid out once in July or August. So kind of how does that break down? So again, as I mentioned, the district tries to have a little bit of a carryover each year to meet that increasing demand. But at the same time, we also try to make sure we give our teachers a little bit of an increase each year. So you'll notice in our 15-16 year, we allocated, the teacher received $5,000. In 16-17, we were at $5,200. And then in the 17-18 year, we'll be at $5,893. Now, exactly how does that break down? So you'll notice out of Fund 11, in 16, they received $540 biannually. However, that's increasing to $560 for a total of $1,120. Plus, this year, we're receiving an additional $19, which is one-time funding. So it's only for this school year. That's why you see it being tracked separately. So that calculates out to $85 a teacher. So you have the $1,120, and then you have the $85 for that fund. Out of 12, that's the performance pay. Again, went from $2,700 down to $2,750, or excuse me, up to $2,750. The additional one-time funding, $144. And then out of Fund 13, again, those funds are used to help offset costs and pay for additional teachers and supplies and whatever the demand is at that time. It went from $810 up to $840. And the additional funding is $114 per teacher. That's how we arrive at the $5,893 per teacher. A couple things that I want to remind you, or just kind of as a reminder and point out, not all of our teachers receive the performance pay, because if you don't finish the projects to meet all the criteria to make you eligible for the funding, then you don't receive that portion of this, the $5,800. Does that make sense? Plus, if we have staff that leave and we have to fill that classroom with a long-term sub, the funding for long-term sub comes out of our M&O budget. It does not come out of this pot of money. So again, you're creating a little bit of a carry forward from that aspect as well. Plus, please keep in mind that this funding is scheduled to sunset or end in 2021, unless, of course, the legislature or if it's reapproved. But as of right now, it's ending. So what else goes into our budget? So we have our additional funds. So we have our federal projects. Of course, the funding for those projects, or those programs, I should say, is set by the U.S. Department of Education, or the federal government. Those funds are then passed through the Department of Education, who then we apply to the Department of Ed, and then they pass those funds on to us. And so right now, well, as we all know, the federal budget is still kind of in flux as to exactly what those allocations are going to be. So we're just kind of going off of the basis of what we had this year and plan on it for next year and hope that we receive all of that.
Mr. Holland, that's what I was going to ask is the Medicaid funds I noticed was the same from last year, so you answered that question for me. I mean, we don't know if it's going to be that.
We don't. I'm crossing my fingers and my toes. We also have our instructional improvement programs, our Indian gaming funding. So in FY18, we are allocating $480,000, which is, but we budgeted $300,000 for classroom size reduction. Plus, please keep in mind that this is a cash-controlled fund, so we haven't received all of the funding for next year yet. So once we receive that additional funding and we do our budget revision in October or December timeframe, we will revise our budget to capture that additional funding, which we anticipate is about $300,000. So what happens now? So tonight we are bringing you a proposed budget, and we are asking you to call for the public hearing, which you have already done. We will post all that information on the Department of Education's website as well as the district's. We will come back on the 11th of July with this same budget and ask you to adopt it. Once you adopt it, we'll then, of course, upload that to the Department of Education and to the county by July the 14th and be ready to go. And then, of course, our next budget revision, as I've said several times, will be in October. Do we have any questions?
I'd just like to say thank you to you and your staff for preparing this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I agree. My head's spinning as always, but thank you for trying to break it down in the cookie shelf at the bottom. cookie shelf for me. I appreciate it.
Whatever I can do to help. And if you need it more, then just tell me.
I second and third everything that they said. Thank you for this clear, concise presentation. I did, just for giggles, I looked on the ADE website. Good luck trying to find that information on there. That was not, if you looked there to find it by chance? Have any other school districts posted? Because it's...
Posted their budget?
Yeah, well, really, the 1.06 raise that they have to.
Right. They're still working all of that out.
Yeah, they are. I'm not terribly confident they're going to get that all done, but that website is an absolute mess. If anyone was looking for it, you probably better make it a phone call or reading our minutes to find that information because anyway.
Unfortunately, that's the state for you.
Thank you, and I'll take your word for it.
It is.
And then I'll ask Gary. So, yes, thank you for putting that all together and the explanation. You make it a little easier to understand, that's for sure.
Oh, good. I'm happy to do that.
Does anyone else have any questions? No? All right. Thank you, Mr. Holland.
Thank you.
So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Now, I would like to point out that we do have our public hearing, and we do have our meeting scheduled for the adoption of this budget on July 11th, and that is scheduled at 9 a.m. So it will not be our normal evening board meeting. It is scheduled to occur at 9 a.m. on July 11th. And, you know, we apologize for the change, but it is fortunately summer, and we do have to have 3 board members here to sign it. And that was the time we could have 3 board members here to sign it, because come the 12th we don't, and we need to get this to the state. So we will make sure it's posted out there and everything else, just like our normal board meetings, but for people who watch our board meetings, so that they know that that meeting is scheduled on July 11th at 9 a.m. So we're not trying to do anything weird on our public presentation, the public notice. That is the time that we can be available to do that. So 9 a.m. July 11th. So, all right. So we are now on our future agenda items. We have a couple that are still here that I know that we will be getting to. Any other future agenda items?
President Reese, in reference to the overview of services provided by guidance counselors, I wish that one to be addressed as college and career readiness presentation. Okay. And also, if we could get an update, we had a presentation some time ago in reference to child care. We were having that conversation. I'd like to know if there's been any further discussion in reference to that, if we could have a work study session on that. And
was there, because I couldn't be there.
Yes, oh, that's right, I forgot.
As far as I know, it was discussion, and that was it. Was there something else that was supposed to be going on?
President Reese, members of the board, we did send out memos to the whole district in regards to the discounts we were having for child care. We did have 2 individuals come to us to ask for needs-based child care, and we were able to provide those individuals with a heavily discounted rate for the preschool program. The before school and after school program is heavily discounted at over 75%, and then the preschool program we've discounted at 20% for district employees, and then for those with special needs have approached us individually, and we've taken care of those needs individually. Was that what you were referring to, Mr. Ratovich?
No, I think we're. Can we talk about why you're here? Okay. No, I didn't mean by you're here, but I think part of the discussion, as far as we were looking at some options to make our district to be the district of choice for teachers to come to, and some other additional incentives in reference to child care is what we were looking for in that discussion that was taking place. And that's, I think, what we were looking for, and to getting an update in reference to that. Okay. And one other thing, I've been getting quite a few questions in the community from the parents and that, and I'm electing to have possibility in the end of July, if not the first part of August, an update on the library and media centers and what to expect in this coming school year. And as always, I think we look for, in reference to that presentation, a cross-section of that department in reference to the people who are going to be enrolled in presenting that program to our children.
I just want to clarify to make sure, I'm not sure what kind of presentation we're looking for.
I'd just like to know, a number of parents have been asking me what's going to take place in our media centers now that we have 9 library specialists coming on board this coming school year. What exactly is going to take place in these rooms? And I personally don't know right this minute. I haven't seen any job descriptions or anything.
We have a job description
Okay.
we approved some time ago.
I'd like to just have an overview of that, President Reese.
Okay. Okay. We'll talk, because I don't want to waste people's time, so I want to find out exactly what you're looking for, because it would be a presentation in work study for us, which isn't recorded, which the community wouldn't get.
Okay.
So they couldn't even come back and watch a video. So I just want to make sure that we meet the need.
Of
So,
the interest of the community.
right, if the community's asking about that, I'll talk to you afterwards so we
Okay,
can
me
make
too.
sure that we,
That word would get out correct. Sure.
yeah,
Okay.
so
Perfect.
that we get what we need to.
Sure.
So I don't want to have a work study and not meet the information we were looking for and everything.
Sure.
So
Sure.
And President Reese, if I may just add on to that, I believe some curriculum is also being developed with regards to this. So you're interested in knowing what that looks like a little bit, right?
Yes.
At that time?
right, because it
Okay.
was my understanding that, well, we did have a job description that we can go back and specifically look at, that the job description for the media specialists would be a technology piece, and that there's an and part of the implementation of the new curriculum, but there is a technology piece in our new curriculum that the media specialists will be handling. So I don't know whatever that technology piece is of our curriculum, but that our new curriculum has a technology piece, and that technology piece would be taught by the media specialists. So we can just take a look and review that. Any other?
Dr. Thomason, when can we expect maybe our first information coming from our strategic plan groups? Like what's going to be our first update
President
coming
Reese,
our
members
way?
of the board, we did notify the committees that for the first 2 goals, they would be presenting during the work study in August, and then for the second 2 goals would be the second meeting in August. And so the committees are preparing information right now to bring it to the work study for the board and for the community for our August board meetings.
I have something else. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, and again, it's like the work study they'll be presenting, but will we also bring it then here to this meeting for the public to hear exactly what we, again, just so that it's recorded and it's out there for the community to hear?
President Reese, members of the board, if it pleases the board, we can put that into an informational item and do a PowerPoint for the board meeting so it's presented to the public. We can definitely do that.
Anything else? Mr.
Just one
Glover?
more, President Reese. I just, excuse me, I think, I just want the board's thoughts on this, but in the last couple of weeks, it struck me that there's at least 2 instances where I think that we would be a stronger district if there was some consistent training in certain things that happened, and I'm being purposely obtuse, but I just wanted us to start thinking, maybe, if you guys were interested in hearing what Higley's plan is for PD, and what PD we have provided over the years, and what training is ongoing. If any of you would be interested in hearing a report on that at some point, maybe not August. That sounds busy, but to put it on there, because I think constant ongoing training for employees helps them be better at their job, and with 10% turnover, I think it's important that we have something that is, we don't just do once and we revisit. Anyway, your thoughts, board members, please.
Well, and it's my understanding that pretty much most of their PD this year is going to be curriculum based. So that can be something that we can try and get some information from Mrs. Richards and from Dr. Schillingberg, and if there's specific areas, please share that with Dr. Thomason. But it was my understanding, just based on from what Dr. Schillingberg's talked about with the implementation of curriculum, that those PD days were going to be going back and reviewing, okay, so what's gone on, how's this worked, what do we need to change, what do you need more information on? Not all year, but my understanding was a lot of them, as well as we prepare for another curriculum adoption next year.
So but Title II gives us professional development money, and some of our textbook adoption money was for that part of PD. But what else do we spend? I don't know what we spend our Title II money on, I guess, and that's what I'm interested in.
Sure, I agree with Mr. Glover. I think it's important for the board to take a look at what type of professional development is taking place in our district, and perhaps when the new HR person comes on board, maybe what her plans are for the future. I'd really like to hear what her ideas are as she comes into the district and for the new school year too as well.
Also, President Race, members of the board, there are some state mandated regular professional development trainings that we must do every year, bloodborne pathogens, mandatory reporting, some of those things that are also included with the use of our Title II funds to do some of those tracking make sure that all teachers and administrative staff know exactly what to do for those issues. But we will bring back a professional development plan for the board to approve.
Yeah, just some information, because we also have to remember our middle schools and high schools, they get one professional development day a month versus our elementaries who get them weekly. So with our curriculum adoption, the elementaries are going to have more ability for conversation and updates and collaboration on professional development specifically regarding that versus our middle and high schools. So, all right, is that it? All right, so I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Have a good night.